Hello, Grinders, and welcome to the Thursday edition of the Daily Fantasy Face-Off. I'm your host, Chris Lowry. The handle is Pepsi7, and as always, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Mr. Boggs Light will be joining me today. What's up, my friend?
Not too much. It's an interesting little slate we got here, especially for a Thursday. But you know what? I like these shorter slates. At least it's been my calling card this season. You get a big 12, 13 game slate, and haven't panned out for me. But those 3 game slates, and especially I like these 7 game slates because there's enough to differentiate. Although there are some obvious spots to target tonight, but there's enough to get around in tournaments that you can certainly gain an edge.
It's an interesting one. Like you said, you're used to having these, 2 to 4 game slates on the off days, and then on the big days like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, we're used to having 10 to 12 games here. So a 7 spot, it's kind of right in the middle there. A little different for a Thursday, but it certainly is an interesting slate. A lot of good options out there, both in the high dollar range and the mid-tier range as far as line stacks go. So we'll be talking about all those for you. As usual, we'll break down the entire schedule game by game. Any questions to the game we're on? Throw a question in the chat there. We'll do our best to answer it. But only 7 games. We might have a little bit of time here for some questions for you guys after as well. And, of course, we'll end the show with our NHL gimmicks, where I'll be giving up my big money, no whammy play of the night. This is the player that I like the most. You'll also get my bold fade of the night. And, of course, Boggs and I both will give you our fearsome threesome, which is 3 players that we like in each price bracket. Boggs, without further ado, 7 games. Let's dive into it. Let's enjoy breaking down this slate. It is a good one. Edmonton Oilers, New Jersey Devils. The Devils, off to a good start. If you look at their record, of course, you dig into their advanced metrics, and you see a team that is not very good defensively, giving up the most scoring chances against per 60, and they're the worst possession team with Corsi against per 60. Of course, the Edmonton Oilers can't seem to score. Dead last in goals per game. But again, digging into the statistics tells you that a lot of poor puck luck for Edmonton here, as they're the number 1 team in scoring chances for, the number 2 team in Corsi for, and of course, led by Connor McDavid, who's been one of the best players in hockey, maybe the best player in hockey this season offensively, even though the numbers aren't really supporting that. This tells me that we can probably roster the Oilers tonight and expect some pretty good results here if we're going to see regression from this Devils team.
Yeah. The only downside is that, while these guys have, just struggled, to just find the back of the net, hasn't been for lack of chances, like you mentioned, their prices still remain up there.
Yeah.
I actually think that's a good thing. I think it will at least make some people hesitate in tournaments. But for me, Connor McDavid is the top overall play on the slate tonight. Not named Tarasenko. I'll save myself a little bit there. But you got to like him. And it's only a matter of time before they break through. We saw what the Blues and Tarasenko did to this Devils team back on Tuesday. This is a prime blow-up spot, but, I think if anything, this game has the potential to be the highest scoring game of the night. I like both sides in this one. But for me, Edmonton, sticking with that top line. Some of these other guys are starting to come along, Strome, Nugent Hopkins. But, it's just a scenario for me where I'm going to stick with, best player in the game, arguably. And as long as there's nothing that comes out where they're shuffling up their lines, which they shouldn't, Draisaitl, Maroon, McDavid, they're definitely a good, solid line stack target tonight.
Yeah, and Maroon also getting top power play minutes as well, which at some points during the season he wasn't. So he becomes one of the better mid-tier plays across the board. He talked a little bit about the second and third lines here for Edmonton. I think, they're both in play tonight if you're looking to stack them up with some more of the expensive lines, maybe a Tampa Bay, perhaps the St. Louis, which we'll get to later on. You could certainly roll out there. I like that second line probably more than the third line with Nugent Hopkins and Lucic. And it's hard to say who's going to be the third member of that line. Drake Kajulia is out due to injury. It might be Pakarinen going up there, but the second line in general, I guess if you're going to play the second versus the third, Boggs, which way do you go here?
I mentioned I didn't want to mess around with it because Kajula's going to be out. Flip a coin, to be honest with you. I'd maybe probably rather play Strome, Jokinen, and if it's Pekarainen, if it's Slepchev, you just have to wait and see who comes out. But any one of those third guys are going to be cheap, along with Jokinen and Strome. Nothing personal, but I would just go down and play the price game in that scenario. I will say that because Kajula is out, we could also see Draisaitl hop back on that top power play. So, it's a scenario for me where I'm still liking Draisaitl over Maroon for obvious reasons, but I think Draisaitl will step back on that top power play tonight. So that's why I'm not really excited about anyone below. There's certainly potential there, but the multi-goal potential is really going to be, centered on that top line.
We talked a little bit about Milan Lucic here, and the other night, Bob, I don't know if you caught it, he got into a fight. I believe it was his first fight of the year. When asked after the game, why, what prompted the fight? And he said, well, the kid asked me to go, and I haven't had a fight in a while. I just wanted to scrap somebody. It's been interesting that hockey's changed so much. The game is so fast, very little fighting out there. Every once in a while, it's nice to see a good old scrap, Boggs. I certainly missed it, and it leads me to ask you because, of course, then you start watching that, and they start talking about the best fighters of all time, the best fights of all time. I got to ask you, who are some of your top fighters of all time that you enjoy watching?
Maury McSorley was, one that, I have not kind of a personal relationship, but my dad's met him several times, played golf with him. And, he was, embodied an enforcer. He was out there with Gretzky on the ice.
Yeah.
And he protected Gretzky. So, McSorley was a guy that I grew up watching, always liked. Bummer the way his career ended, but still a guy that widely respected around the league. You've got, I think my favorite fight of all time was when the Darian and Kevin Hatcher, the brothers, fought in a game. That just cracked me up. I remember that. And then obviously the goalie fights are always fun. But who's your favorite fighter?
It's interesting. You mentioned Martin McSorley. That takes you back to the Kings and Leafs run in 91, 92 there when Wendell Clark and McSorley went toe-to-toe, which is a great fight. Ty Domi, being a Leaf fan, Ty Domi was unbelievable. All of 5'7" or 5'8" and taking on the big thugs of the NHL and winning most of those things. How many guys broke their hand on Ty Domi's head? And one of the best fights ever was in Madison Square Garden when he took down the current heavyweight kingpin at the time. I'm drawing a blank to who it was. And, of course, walked away showing off the belt there. It was pretty impressive. But I got to say, from my era, and, of course, I can't go back, obviously, in the 70s and 60s and 50s and whatnot, but Bob Probert was probably the toughest guy that I ever saw. All due respect to Martin McSorley, and I'm there with you. Man, Bob Probert was an absolute monster, and very few guys wanted to fight him, Bugs.
Yeah. Hey, there you go. I can also bring up Stu Grimson, even more recently, my boy Peros.
Reaper.
Yeah. He was fun too. So yeah, it's a good part. I hope that they don't scrap it. I'm all for, making the game safer and even discouraging it a little bit, but let these guys get out there and fight every now and again. Jared Bowl needs he's a person too,
I will say that Bob Probert versus Craig Cox might have been the best fight I've ever seen. Craig Cox, the kid from the Vancouver Canucks there, and they went toe-to-toe, I believe, 3 times. Their first fight is just unbelievable. So if you've never seen Probert versus Cox, you definitely need to look that up and watch it if you're a hockey fan. And the Grim Reaper, Stu Grimson, as you mentioned, maybe the best nickname of all time in the NHL. Getting back on track here, though, Oscar Klefbom, of course, that booming shot of his from the point was certainly coming to play. Still moderately priced. You could pair him up with that Oilers top line, although it's difficult to do because they're so expensive. But if you can make it work, Klefbom, a nice addition there. You talked about this game being one of the higher scoring games of the night. And, you talked about only really being on McDavid and the Oilers top line, which leads me to believe you're interested in some of these Devils lines here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really that top line for me with Hischier, Hall, and looks like Palmieri is back on that top line tonight. They expect to get him back. And we all know Hall and Palmieri were, one of the more underrated, under the radar lines. Really, they were a one-line team last year. Now that they've tried to balance it out, but regardless, they got the chemistry. They're out there with the kid, and with home ice advantage, I don't think they're going to be out there expected to try and stop McDavid. New Jersey doesn't have a shutdown line. We keep saying that, but I think it's in their best interest to get, Palmieri and Hall out there off the ice away from McDavid as much as possible tonight. And, there's always a little revenge narrative there for Taylor Hall. I think he scored a goal against them earlier this year. That's the line I see breaking through, and it's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, The only issue I think there is it's a little bit more expensive than I would like it to be, and Hull's price continues to creep up here, but it's certainly playable tonight. That second line for the, I guess also back on the first line a little bit, you still only have Taylor Hall on that top power play in it, which is frustrating. You want Hischier and Palmieri with him to correlate more points, but makes it a little more difficult to generate them. The second line, though, they play together, at least at least Henrique and Stafford on the same power play unit. Of course, Bratt jumps up to that top unit and is really kind of one of the best point per dollar plays on the site there. Thoughts on that New Jersey second line here?
It's really the same way I feel about the secondary lines for Edmonton. I don't want to go there tonight. There are other secondary, even third lines that I would rather target than try and mess around with some of these guys that just don't have that multi-goal potential. Henrique's had some good games, and Stafford is a good veteran player. Kid Bratt, I don't hate the line, but similar to the way I feel about Edmonton, I'm paying up or I'm looking in a different direction.
All right, the goaltenders in this one appear to be Corey Schneider versus Cam Talbot. You're expecting goals. I'm expecting you to be off these goalies then.
Absolutely.
All right, that's enough said about the goaltenders there. We'll move on to the Blackhawks and the Flyers up next here. This is an interesting one for me. I look at the expert survey and I see Jay Willie's on the Flyers, and I kind of like the Flyers tonight a little bit. That top line's been unbelievable this season. The Chicago Blackhawks, one of the worst teams in hockey with scoring chances against and Corsi against. And the only reason they have a winning record is because of the unbelievable play of Corey Crawford. On the flip side, I see that you're kind of against that Flyers top line tonight because you expect the Hawks to get a good dose of Kane and Taves. And, of course, Corey Crawford's been so good net. You don't really see a reason to play them tonight. I'm kind of lost in the shuffle here because I don't know what to do with the Flyers tonight. I look at these numbers and think, hey, we could pick on the Hawks. But then when you break it down, do I really want to pick on Crawford? Not necessarily. Do I really think that top line could dominate versus Taves and Kane? Perhaps not. But you also have to wonder, Boggs, is Taves still a shutdown center, considering how bad these numbers are for the Blackhawks?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think, it's so much related to Taves. I think it's more of, the diminishing effect of, Keith and Seabrook having to play 30-plus minutes for so many years and all those extended playoff runs that they had. I've never really been sold that Keith is a top 5 defenseman. And he's got 2 Norris trophies, I think. He's had some incredible years, but it's not so much Taves in my opinion. It's just, the whole foundation of the team. They just don't have as much depth as they did back, when they were winning Stanley Cups left and right. That being said, I think this is an interesting move by Coach Quenneville, loading up his top line to go up against, a loaded top line because, Couturier, say what you will about him, he ain't Jonathan Taves. You got Kaner and you got Sharpie up there with them. They're going to have their hands full. And because Philly can't score essentially from their second, especially their third lines, they haven't been getting production from them. I think that you got to like Crawford in this game. And I like the Hawks' chances because I think that they, even though I just got done talking about how they're not having a lot of depth, I still think they're deeper than this Philadelphia team. So that's how I expect them to break through. I think that special teams will be in Chicago's advantage. Unless Chicago takes some stupid penalties, I think Crawford's got what it takes to steal this win.
Which maybe is a reason to get off the Flyers tonight. Again, I'm still debating what to do. And at some point, when you're playing multiple GPPs like I will be tonight, you got to limit somewhere. So perhaps either get off of Philadelphia or maybe I'm thinking just playing them in some smaller dollar ones. Get the coverage there. We don't have to play them in the big boy tournaments in a matchup that might not be so great. And I agree, that's a tough matchup versus Taves and Kane. Their hands will indeed be full. They had been so good, though. I still wouldn't be surprised to see a multi-goal game out of them tonight. And, of course, Shane Gostisbehere, who you want to put up there with them. From the Flyers defensive unit here, you expect the Hawks to win this game. You mentioned, that top line for Chicago. Do you think perhaps their second line breaks through against one of these weaker Flyers lines, or do you think that their top line not only shuts down the Flyers top line, but also produces tonight?
I'm not excited about the Chicago secondary scoring, but again, I think it's better than the depth of Philadelphia just on paper. Another thing that, has me a little bit off of, I'm kind of off of Philly for the reasons we just mentioned, but you got to also remember that Quenneville, he plays the mind game, and it can very easily be, just a simple switch from Taves to Anisimov down there. And, you got Taves, Saad, and Panic, a line that started the year together. And then Anisimov, Kane. I think he's going to switch a lot of things up depending on how this game goes. If Chicago gets out to a lead, then I think Taves will go back with Saad, Panic. But regardless, it's, you'll never talk me off, Patrick Kane. It's just I don't think that line will stay intact like some other coaches would, let it play out. Quenneville's usually quick to give the hook.
And perhaps that's also putting the Flyers' top line back in play a little bit on home ice. They're going to fade Taves. So the Blackhawks get up a couple goals early. You could see Philadelphia open it up. You could see that Chicago line get mixed up, and you could see that top line for Philly try to avoid Mr. Taves, Saad, and Panic. But it's really hard to say how it's going to go. You're trying to figure out the entire game script and break it down. But needless to say, the Flyers, even though they're at home facing a Chicago Blackhawks team that has not been good defensively, maybe not in the best spot as it would appear, but certainly still playable in your GPPs. The goaltenders in this one, Boggs, Corey Crawford, who has been arguably the best goaltender in hockey. Actually, I would say the best goalie in hockey this season. A 177 goals against, a 945 save percentage. He is the reason Chicago is playing over 500 hockey right now versus Brian Elliott, who's fairly cheap across the industry. So I would say both goalies are in play for GPPs. Obviously, Crawford, if they win, he's likely to steal this one. And with Elliott's price being moderate to cheap across the industry, if you believe in Philly, Elliott's probably got 30-35 save potential as well here.
Yeah, I think you can make a case for both goalies, but, and on DraftKings is, in particular, Crawford, that price tag, man, it's, I think they need to tweak the algorithm a little bit. I get that, the team hasn't been playing good defense, but, a road dog, Crawford's still going to go overlooked. And I mentioned how I don't like the top line for Philly, and that's the only reason they're scoring. You get this team in general, and especially outside of this top line, has generated the fewest scoring chances among all the teams on the slate here tonight. So where a weakness of Chicago is allowing too many scoring chances, Philly ain't generating them, at least in large quantities. So if that equates to me a lot of low percentage stops, and Crawford has been, goes without saying, he's got the best save percentage, but he's stopping the most of those just easy saves, in addition to making the good tough saves as well. So I like him. I love that price tag. People are, we kind of saw it yesterday. I don't know what the final line was, but Kucherov, Stamkos, those guys were not as highly owned as they should be. Yeah. And I think so many people still are relying on Vegas. I don't mind to use it as somewhat of a tool. But when you see Crawford road dog, it's going to lower his ownership percentage, and really it shouldn't, in my opinion.
And if any goaltender on the slate is going to post a monster game and a win, I'm siding with Corey Crawford as well. I absolutely love him in GPPs, and he was my GPP goaltender that I wrote up over on RotoWorld. If you want to head over there to Daily and look at my RotoWorld NHL article. Moving on to game number 3 of our 7-game slates, another good one here for DFS purposes. We got the Minnesota Wild, who lost last night in Toronto. And are one of 2 teams playing the second game in as many nights, facing a rested Montreal Canadiens squad that is starting to come around. The offense is starting to click. Looks like Andrew Shaw will be in the lab tonight. And Jonathan Duran, they're saying, is day-to-day. But he did practice this morning. He's likely to suit up. Montreal Canadiens offense is clicking. Bogs are still fairly cheap. We don't love to pick on the Minnesota Wild here. And likely Dubnyk again in net with Alex Stalock going back to Minnesota because his wife is giving birth. We'd likely see him start again here. But, we don't like to pick on Minnesota or Dubnyk, but teams on a back-to-back. Montreal's offenses look really good. They're underrated. They're cheap. I think they're playable everywhere tonight. Yeah,
it does get a little tricky, though. I don't think Duran's going to play. I know Shaw is going to, but I don't think Duran's going to play.
Really? This morning. So what would make you think he wouldn't play? Let me just look this up while you give us that information.
I read that he didn't practice, but either way, if he does play, then sure. Then you can go back to targeting Montreal the way we wanted to back on Tuesday. That'd be a good spot. Duran.
Just going to cut you off there, Bob. Sorry, just to update here. It says, it looks like here, Duran's game time decision. Duran took part in Montreal's optional skate this morning. Blah, blah, blah. Claude Julien says he's improved from 50-50. Duran said he felt good after the session and seems like he'll be ready to play. So that was this morning at 11:53. So, yeah, it does look like he will play according to RotoWorld here.
Okay, well, good. That's kind of what I want because I wanted to get some value, and his line is still too cheap. But, really, I think the safer, option and even lower owned in tournaments is to even dip down to that third line with Plekanec and Gallagher in particular. I prefer to use Gallagher more as a one-off oftentimes, but this line, I think, will still get a little bit of a boost in playing time, especially since that fourth line that they've somehow created. I wouldn't surprise me if they don't see more than 5 minutes of ice time. So all three lines are in play, but I think that the Plekanec, Gallagher, Byron line at least will avoid the Koivu line for most of this game. Take that for you all.
Yeah, the only issue, I guess, with that third line is that only Gallagher on the second power play, and it's seeing power play time there. But these guys have been pretty good, like you mentioned, and they play really well together, which puts all three lines in play. Obviously, the top line of Max Pacioretty, Philippe Danault, and Andrew Shaw is the probably still the top line with Pacioretty being the best player, though. But I love the second line of Galchenyuk, Duran, and Lehkonen, even though Galchenyuk not getting power play time, along with Danault, really. 2/3 of both those lines are on the power play unit here. I saw that night there. You talked about going 2-2-2s in stack, and this is the prime example here. Shea Weber, obviously a guy that you'd love to add to this to either of these three lines here, most of the top two lines to correlate the Habs' top power play here. And sometimes you don't need to have the third player like a Danault or a Galchenyuk if they're not a sniper or if they're not in the power play. So I saw the other night there you had some big lineups out there where you had just Shaw and Pacioretty together and ignored that center. It was more of a distributor and not getting power play time and with a 2-2-2 stack. It's worked out really well for you in the past. Is that how you approach your Montreal again tonight, or do you want to have a piece of all three players just because they're so cheap?
I'm gonna wait for confirmation of certain guys playing, and it's I don't really have a problem either way with either strategy, but I think for me in my strategy in that last game was power play time and exposure, and I didn't necessarily want to load up on a Danault along with Pacioretty and Shaw, but it's just really kind of how I feel about certain teams, certain players. I'm nothing against Danault, but in that scenario, I was targeting power play time, so getting 3 of power play and then along with 2 other teams incorporated into those stacks was the strategy I used.
It certainly paid off well for you. You could use it again tonight, although Minnesota, a pretty disciplined team and not a bad PK, so the power play not as important here. And as I mentioned earlier, Shea Weber, a nice addition to either of those top 2 lines if you're stacking them. And not all line stacks need their defenseman with them, but Shea Weber is a big, huge bonus to that and one of the better, more elite offensive defensemen in the game. I prefer the Pacioretty line, love the Duran line as well. And again, both of them play really in all formats. Even in cash games, if you're looking to get a little bit of value with a Lehkonen or an Andrew Shaw, both guys see ample time and power play time here, so I think you can put them in your cash games as well here. On the flip side, the Minnesota Wild got a couple lines that can score. We saw it last night with Eric Staal and Jason Zucker producing a multi-goal game. We know Granlund, Koivu, and Niederreiter is certainly talented, but they're on the road again. Tail end of a road back-to-back here, and Montreal does not give up a lot of scoring chances. The goaltending has been the issue for them, but Lindgren looks solid in net, and perhaps he can stymie the Wild again tonight here. Any interest in the Wild offense at all here?
I mean, not really. But, like Pacioretty and Shaw and Danault is not what I classify as a shutdown line. It's a lot of that is put on, the weight of the shoulders of Shea Weber. But still, I could see maybe, making a case for Koivu, Granlund, and Niederreiter. It's a solid line. And I certainly like their prospects more of maybe getting a goal at, relatively cheap price tags and along with the addition of playing, seeing a ton of ice time and, shooting quite a bit than I did with Vegas back on Tuesday. It's a better team than Vegas. So I could maybe see super unowned Koivu, Granlund, and Niederreiter, but I'm not going out of my way to pluck these guys in there tonight.
Quick question here in the chat before we move on to the goaltenders in this one. If you're only choosing one of the Habs lines, which one would you go, or will you be on both of those lines tonight in GVP's box?
Assuming Duran plays and assuming it's Duran, Galchenyuk, and Lehkonen, that would be my preferred line to target since they'll be the line that gets the best matchup. They'll probably go against the third line of Minnesota. Really, Pacioretty I still don't like playing Shaw, but it was more of a power play thing. I don't necessarily see the Habs, busting out on the power play tonight. So, I don't like to target guys that are going against Koivu, and I think Pacioretty's going to do that. So I might dip down to the third line with Gallagher over Pacioretty in that top line or whatever you want to call it.
It's interesting take there on the lines for Montreal. The goaltenders, Devin Dubnyk gets his second start as May nights versus Charlie Lindgren, who we mentioned, who's been quite good. 38 save performance over the Blackhawks was very solid, and his last outing as well, only allowing 2 goals and getting the win, making 30 saves. Is the kid legit? We don't know, but he's still cheap. He's in a good spot to win, and I think he's playable again tonight.
Hey, he hasn't lost a game in the NHL in 3 years. Yes,
which would be his, I believe, his 5th start tonight.
Yeah, but no, look, it's a good spot. We're starting to we mentioned it, back on Tuesday, and sure enough, I think you could expect a somewhat similar result. Maybe he even has a little bit more upside tonight. But yeah, I don't have a problem firing him back up, especially where he's, moderately priced to cheap. Again, though, I will say I didn't like him as much tonight as I liked him on Tuesday.
I agree. A little riskier tonight, which is why I think he's a better play in your GPPs where you're looking for salary relief, especially over there on FanDuel where he's quite cheap. So if you're trying to do some kind of double stack, perhaps a St. Louis and Edmonton double stack, where it's going to be difficult, perhaps dropping down Lindgren gets the job done. In that case, I think he's certainly worthy. But I think there's other goalies that you'll want to play over him in cash games. We'll be getting to them soon. And one of them is up next here as the St. Louis Blues and Jake Allen are home facing the Arizona Coyotes, who are one of the worst teams in hockey tonight. The Blues top line has just been, unbelievable this season. You could argue they've been the top line in hockey along with the Flyers top line and the Lightning's top line, of course. They're in a prime spot tonight, Boggs, and I think it's one of those situations where it's not should we rush the Blues, but how many?
Yeah. I'll say as many as I was going to say, as many as you like, but don't roster Jake Allen tonight.
Yes.
But yeah, this is a great spot for the Blues. It does concern me a little bit. It's because it's more me and my mentality, and I'm somewhat trying to talk myself out of it. But this is a fantastic spot for the Blues, and it starts with that top line. I really have zero interest in Arizona in this matchup. St. Louis can shut down one-line teams, and that top line for Arizona has not been producing despite all that ice time they've been receiving. So, yeah, this is all Blues, and I think you could even make a case for dipping down to that second line. It's not my preferred, route, because Stastny isn't a guy that necessarily shoots as much as I would expect or like when paying up for like a moderately priced guy. And, they're going to be busy trying to shut down Keller and that top line. So, I like it, but you can also dip down to the third line for some value. Payarvi, Yaskin, these guys are on the second power play unit. I think that it's certainly a scenario where St. Louis can score 5 goals, but it'll only be maybe 2 from the Tarasenko line. I think that wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility tonight. I'm still going to play a ton of Tarasenko, even in tournaments, but their ownership in this spot might be as high as we've seen from any complete line all season long, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree with you. They're going to be mad popular tonight, but there's no reason to fade them. Tarasenko, Schwartz, Shan, all 3 of those guys in the top unit as well. They all shoot the puck as well. It's not like some of the other lines like we talked about, in a situation like Montreal, for example, where you have a guy like Daniel that's not really a shooter, not the top power play. And all 3 of these guys can snipe. All 3 of these guys are seeing a ton of minutes at both even strength and with the man advantage here. And it is easily the top line to stack tonight. I know you love Edmonton, but if you had to choose between Edmonton and St. Louis, I think he's still going to side with the Blues tonight, no?
Yeah, I think that Edmonton will be lower owned, but they'll still garner their fair share ownership, just simply based on the matchup and obviously with home ice. Not that it necessarily matters, but yeah, it's definitely the Blues one. Oh, I think you muted yourself, Pepsi.
There we go. Off mute. Sorry, guys. Thanks, Boggs. Obviously, if you can get to Alex Pietrangelo, he is a nice addition to that top line. But again, that top line's expensive, and Pietrangelo, one of the most expensive defensemen on the slate. But he is my top offensive option out here. Arizona is still not very good while shorthanded here. A bad defensive team, and Pietrangelo just continues to put up the points. So if you can get to him, He is certainly worthy of playing, as is his partner, Colton Parayko, on that second unit as well. If you're going to look to that second unit, or you're going to look to Pavarvi and Jaskin, as Boggs pointed out, Parayko makes a nice addition there as well. Boggs, you mentioned that top line for Arizona. You're not really interested in it. Stefan Keller-Domi, it's had its moments. Keller, again, one of the best young talents in the game. A multi-goal game is tough tonight here on the road. They are cheap. So I guess there's some merit just because of how good Keller's been. But with them seeing Stastny and Steen and a tough Blues offense, I think I'm with you. I think I'm fading them in all formats tonight here, Bucks.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, Keller is not cheap. I think his price is, skyrocketed compared to some of these other young talents that we've seen over the years come up, and some that are even up and coming this year. I think it's not necessarily justified, especially, he had a nothing burger in Pittsburgh. Now he's got to go to St. Louis. They're going to be physical, tough with him. They can shut him down. So it's just, if there would be a line I'd play, if you put a gun to my head, it would be that top line. But this is a bad hockey team, man.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I won't have any exposure to Desert Dogs here tonight. The goaltenders, Antti Raanta, we're still trying to figure him out, of course, but this is certainly not the spot to roll the dice on the road versus St. Louis. But Carter Hutton gets the call over Jake Allen tonight. Carter Hutton, one of the more start-worthy backup goaltenders when it comes to playing him in cash games. A .951 save percentage and a .167 goals against. Those numbers are outstanding. They're actually better than Corey Crawford, though, in limited action here. But still, Hutton, very capable backup here, moderately priced across the industry. Is this your safest bet for cash games? And what are your thoughts on him in GPPs?
Yeah, he's definitely playable in cash games. I think the ownership on him, he could certainly shut out Arizona. So, I'll have a little bit of exposure. It's more site dependent. I think on DraftKings, you can get away with not playing him because I think in a tournament, he's going to need a shutout to pay off his exorbitant ownership. I think that there's goalies that have a lot more, opportunity to outscore him tonight. So unless, say I need those savings on FanDuel, or if I just end up with a team with a ton of cap space, which I don't think I will tonight, then I can throw in Hutton, but I'm not starting any lineups with him tonight.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think in cash games, you want the safe win. That's where you go. And on DK, I think you can fade him because of his high price over there at 8.2. Whereas on FanDuel, I think it's about 8.3, 8.5, and that mid-range is a little cheaper in comparison on FanDuel. So I think that if you need to drop down in some salary and GPPs, you can still get Hutton, and the win's certainly there for you. And like you said, he does have shutout potential, but he's likely not to see 40 saves like a Corey Crawford. All right, up next, we're heading out west to Detroit Red Wings, the Calgary Flames, and this is a tough one for me. We're looking at inexpensive line stacks to go with our Edmontons and our St. Louis tonight, and this is a game that kind of has it. Detroit's got two lines that can score, and they're both fairly cheap. Calgary's got a second line that's pretty cheap, and it can also score. And Calgary's top line, of course, is always in play because they've got, that big potential. But that being said, I don't love to pick on Detroit. I figure that 3M line is going to be out there against the Zetterberg line, which will make it tough for them to score. I'm just not sure if I'm going to see a whole lot of goals here and if we need to target this game.
Yeah, it's the same feeling for me. And it's obviously a lot of my bias against Calgary kicking in here. But, look, Monahan and Gaudreau, any way you shake it, they're in a good spot here because they're on home ice. They'll get that last change. They'll get those guys out there, likely against, Larkin and whatever appears to be that second line for Detroit.
And Decatur and Tatar, I'm showing.
Yeah, see, then that's it makes it difficult from a matchup perspective. It shouldn't get you off of Monahan or Gaudreau. Just know that they'll get in the best spot possible. To be honest with you, what the hell is Blashill thinking? Larkin, Mantha, Athanasiou is a top quality line, and he should be Tatar, Nyquist, Zetterberg, mixing it up and matching these guys. You got a kid in Furk and Athanasiou on the fourth line with David Booth. I want to play some Detroit because I think that if there was Larkin, Athanasiou, and Mantha, that could be a sneaky line to maybe target. But can't trust Blashill. The guy's a bonehead, and really the only thing you could trust is on home ice that Johnny Hockey, especially against a weak Eastern Conference team, is gonna be in a good spot.
Yeah, I mean that second line that you mentioned when Athanasiou and was playing with Manta and Larkin, those kids can fly. They create a lot of chances, look really good. Then of course they split them up, and Furkan on that fourth line all year long. This kid could snipe. He at least should be on that third line, getting some more minutes there. But it's an interesting take, and obviously we're not coaching the Red Wings, so there's not a whole lot we can do about it. But it is frustrating from a DFS point of view. Again, with Zetterberg on that top line, I don't have to go there because that 3M line should do a pretty good job of shutting them down. And of course, Zetterberg's not terrible defensive himself, which you might see these two lines cancel themselves out, that being Detroit 1 and Calgary 2. Any interest in Calgary 2 tonight in GBBs?
A little bit. Where they're cheap, Zetterberg doesn't scare me. He's obviously still a capable and talented player. It's not ideal to target guys that are going to be a lot of defensive zones, but they get the second power play unit. You get the ice time. They're going to be out there in the penalty kill. Detroit has, one of the worst power plays in the league. So there's a lot of opportunity in terms of ice time, block shots, even the power play time they receive. That you can make a case for that second line. I'm not going to be dipping down to the third line, though, with Jágr and Sam Bennett. Much as I love Jágr, that line just doesn't do it for me.
Couple of games to go still here, but a good question in the chat here about where that Calgary top line ranks tonight. You mentioned the Gaudreau Monahan. They had the potential to go off. They've got a good matchup versus an Eastern Conference team. They're going to get out there against maybe the weaker lines for Detroit here. We know a good Gaudreau Monahan can be in home ice, and most of that's due to the fact that their coach is smart and the fact that he puts them out in situations where they can be successful. We should see more of the same tonight. We talked about St. Louis being number 1, Edmonton's number 2, some other offenses that we liked out there, but would Calgary slide in as your third team, or where do you see them in GPPs tonight for a line stack?
It's simply based on their price. I don't love them. I think they're a little bit overpriced. Maybe not so much for this matchup, but I haven't been playing them a lot. I might say I like Montreal if they have that top line back and Drouin's healthy, expected to play a little bit more than them. But I'm going to have some exposure. Say I have 5 teams. That's really kind of what I'm struggling with here because there's another way, another team that won me some money last night that I'm going to think about going back to.
All right, so let me give it to you one more time. If money's not a thing, is it Calgary number 3 tonight?
Yeah.
There you go. That basically sums up the question, I think, for that person in chat. I agree with you. I think Calgary is my third team right now. If money's not a thing, obviously there's some cheaper lines I like more, as does Boggs here. But as far as the powerhouses or the expensive lines, I think Calgary fits nicely in that number 3 hole tonight. Their goaltender, Mike Smith, was not good last time out, but he's been pretty good all season long. Detroit's not a team that fires a whole lot of offense at him, but 25 saves and a win certainly play for Smith. He's moderately priced. Is he cash game worthy tonight?
No. Mike Smith ain't ever cash game worthy, man. And if they lose, it's likely because of him. So don't like Detroit, but they've proven that they can score. And, Mike Smith, he's not the goalie you want to be targeting against, Eastern Conference teams.
Not a goal I don't think you can trust tonight in cash necessarily, and I don't see a lot of shots for him either. Of course, Detroit, as you mentioned, could very well in this hockey game, so I think we're better off with a Carter Hutton in net tonight. And, of course, Smith not likely to see enough shots to really be one of the top scoring goalies tonight, even if he does win. So perhaps a fade across the board is the way to play it. All right, up next, Vancouver Canucks, who've been a surprising team, playing solid hockey, getting great production from those kids in that top line. Well, this is a tough matchup for them tonight on the road versus Anaheim here, of course. And Jacob Markstrom getting the call in net has been terrific this year. And they've played pretty good defensive hockey, really, considering. The Ducks, of course, pretty banged up. Still missing Patrick Eaves, Ryan Kessler, and Ryan Getzlaf, but they're finding ways to win hockey games. You know that better than anybody else here. I kind of like that Ducks top line tonight. I think they're somewhat sneaky here. Your thoughts on the Anaheim Ducks here?
Yeah, I like it a little bit. I'll tell you what, though, I'm not on Vancouver. This is not a spot, and the numbers say that, Anaheim's been awful. And look, they haven't been good. But, Vancouver on the road here, I'm not going that route tonight. I think that second line with Wagner, Cogliano, and Silverberg has what it takes to shut down Horvat and Vancouver's top line. And the depth scoring for Vancouver, while they are, like, on paper, a deep team, they just don't do it for me. Plus, you got Ryan Miller on the flip side for the Ducks, who's been amazing in the limited action this season, taking on his former team. This has got a 2-1 game written all over it, and I think the Ducks win. So I like the top line for the Ducks. I think if they do get some production, it'll be from Raquel and Perry in particular. But it's a tough sell in a game I think is going to stay pretty tight.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a low-scoring game, as you mentioned. Again, the Canucks play at the slowest pace in the NHL, and they're also been pretty good defensively. Again, Markstrom being good in net. I'm off the Canucks offensively as well. As you mentioned, that top line likely to get shut down by Anaheim too here tonight. It's just a tough situation. Anaheim's still a strong, physical, solid hockey club here, regardless of who's in and out of the lineup here. So I think you'll see them slow down the Canucks offense to a halt here tonight. You mentioned Perry and Raquel, the two guys you're looking at, and I'm definitely interested as well. We look across the league tonight here. There's not a lot of games, not a lot of offenses that pop out to you. We talked about St. Louis. We talked about Edmonton. Maybe Calgary, a cheap Montreal, sure. But there's nothing to really love here. So I think that's where Anaheim comes into play. Would this normally be a spot we're interested in a 12-game slate? Probably not. But in a slate like tonight, I think that if you're looking to pair an Edmonton or a St. Louis up with some of these moderately priced line stacks, Perry and Raquel get the job done. And you can include Derek Ranter, who's awful cheap, which brings down the price per line here. So I certainly like them there. Brandon Montour on the point here, Boggs. This kid's been terrific, filling in for Cam Fowler, getting a lot of minutes at both or in all situations, really. And still, the price tag's not too high. It's still moderate across the industry. If you're going to go Perry and Raquel, you're probably going to want some exposure to Montour as well.
Yeah, he's the guy that'll be out there at even strength. It'll look like he may have been off the power play. Hopefully that's a temporary thing. I'll say he didn't have a good game against the Kings. When was it? Tuesday? Was it Tuesday or Wednesday? I don't know when the last game was. He didn't have a good game, and maybe he's in the doghouse. I don't know, but Vatanen is probably the preferred option. He's probably a guy that will be on that top power play unit for sure. And then Lindholm, depending on the situation, and Montour probably flip back and forth. But all the Ducks defensemen are in play. That's the primary reason why they aren't looking like the Coyotes these days is because of that depth they have. And they're all capable of scoring and generating offense. So, it'd probably be Vatanen would be my preferred option.
Yeah, Vatanen and Lindholm back in the loop and on that top power play there. Also moderately priced along with Mr. Montour, who looked to see an increase in ice time in this game tonight. Perhaps the goaltender is Jacob Markstrom. I mentioned how good he has been. This is not the spot for him, though, on the road, facing a Duck squad. Ryan Miller, you mentioned he's been terrific this year at 2.13 goals against average and a 946 save percentage, which is outstanding. Is he cash game worthy tonight?
That's tough. I don't think there's any reason to, roster Miller over Carter Hutton in cash games. And I certainly I'm a big fan of Ryan Miller. I think he is going to really push Gibson to like another level. It's tough. I just don't like this spot because I don't think Vancouver's going to come in here and, put 40 shots on net. So it makes it tough for a tournament as well. Take that for what you will. I wouldn't play him over Hutton in cash games and in tournament. My guy is.
Yeah, I think you can play him in tournament zone. I agree with you. I wouldn't play Miller over Hutton. I think there's situations where, you're stacking up a line or just loading up an offensive team and you can't afford to pay up for a guy like Corey Crawford. So if you can't even afford a Carter Hutton, perhaps, you can go down to Ryan Miller, who I think will win tonight. I think he's an average of 25 shots. Good enough there because we don't have a whole lot of locks in goal tonight. We talk about not trusting Mike Smith. Carter Hutton obviously is the top play. But, Crawford is a guaranteed win? No. Is Cam Talbot a guaranteed win? No. We don't have a lot of teams that are locks or big favorites. So I think that's where Ryan Miller plays. He's moderately priced depending on the site you're on. And I do think the Ducks get the job done tonight in a low-scoring game. So for me, that's where Ryan Miller becomes a GPP option, not necessarily because he's going to see 40 saves and be the top-scoring goaltender tonight. Up next, Tampa Bay Lightning, Los Angeles Kings, and a couple things here. Normally you look at this game, late-night hammer, want some action, but Staples Center, Kings at home, tend to shut down teams. But the Kings, though, are scoring goals. And both their top two lines are somewhat in play tonight. They're cheap. They've been productive. And Tampa Bay hasn't been the defensive juggernaut we thought they might be. They also may have Peter Budaj, likely will have Peter Budaj net, their backup goaltender, which I think opens the door a little bit for the Kings offense. That being said, this Lightning top line has been the best line in hockey. They had another monster game last night in a game where most of us faded them, thinking they wouldn't do much in San Jose. Another 3-goal game from this team. With the Kings not being this the best of themselves defensively, the door is still open for this Tampa Bay Lightning offense as well. And I'm not suggesting we're going to have a shootout here, but I'm just saying there is merit to stacking Tampa Bay because they'll be highly under-owned. Nobody wants to pay that price for this matchup. It's a daunting task going into LA to face the Kings. And I think the Kings having 2 cheaper lines that are fairly productive, facing a Tampa Bay Lightning team playing their second game in as many nights. And, again, we're looking for lines to stack with St. Louis and Edmonton. And I think the Kings play here, Boggs. So am I wrong with this? What do you expect from this game?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll just ask you a question. Did you watch the Kings in the game against the Ducks back on Tuesday?
I didn't see a lot of that. I saw the highlights. I saw how that
it's this Kings team. This ain't your daddy's Kings team. At least it ain't mine. It's almost embarrassing watching these guys, Doughty, Brown, Quick. They're flopping all over the ice. It's Bush League. So this is not the same, just defensive juggernaut team that they were in the past. Now, I'm not saying they're a bad team by any means. I'm just saying that with them not playing scared like they would always be under Sutter, that they are allowed to create more offense, and that creates more scoring chances back and forth. That's why they're giving up a lot of scoring chances early this season, and that's why Quick's been relevant. So I like both teams in this one a little bit. Obviously, Stamkos, top line, under-owned last night in San Jose. The same's going to be the story tonight, even probably more so. But I'm rostering those guys till the end of the day. I think Tampa Bay can win this game. But if I'm rostering anyone on LA, I would probably look to that second line.
Yeah, that second line for the LA Kings, as you mentioned, been very good. When they lost Jeff Carter, I should say, you thought they'd be in trouble, but Adrian Kempe has really stepped up with Toffoli and Pearson. And, of course, that top line of Kopitar, Iafallo, and Dustin Brown, when it got off to a good start, hasn't really slowed down, which is why I mentioned both these top lines the Kings are in play if you're looking for a cheaper line exposure to stack with some of these top lines. So we talked about St. Louis, Edmonton. Calgary's sliding at number 3 as far as expensive lines goes. So Tampa Bay's 4 for you, or would they edge out the Flames for you tonight?
I certainly think they're more talented. It's tough. I want to find a reason not to play Gaudreau and Monahan, but again, that's just me and my biases. So they're in a better spot here any way you shake it, but wouldn't surprise me if Stamkos, Kucherov had another multi-point game. So take that for what you will. Having a hard time making stands today, Pepsi.
Yeah, so this is one of those slates that kind of got you, looking at both ends of it here a little bit. But I agree that Tampa Bay top line, I wrote them up in my article thinking, don't sleep on them tonight. I mean, every time we think that they won't necessarily have a big game, this line is insanely talented, and they can go off for a multi-goal game at any point. And with the Kings not being, like you said, that defensive stalwart that we're used to seeing, they can certainly do it again tonight despite being on the back-to-back here. The goaltender is probably Peter Budaj versus Jonathan Quick. I don't have a whole lot of interest in either because I think this game could very well end up 4-3. What are your thoughts on the tenders here?
Yeah, I'm not. I don't really have a whole lot of interest. Again, though, I'll keep saying it. Quick's gonna be relevant this year, whereas in years past, it was so tough because you'd go, extended periods of time, sometimes almost a whole period, without seeing a shot. So different style, and Quick's certainly capable of standing on his head up against an Eastern Conference team. There probably won't be Perry crashing down on him like he was on Tuesday. But, regardless, I think I would have more interest in playing Quick because I just don't think he will necessarily blow up in your face like Budaj can.
Absolutely agree with that one, although neither goalie really on my radar tonight. We got about a minute before we need to get off the air here with the football show up next with Andy Scott and, of course, Mr. Dean Shavelson, or Dean 78904 if you want to get all technical. So there's a couple of questions here. I'll kind of put them together here, Boggs, and then, of course, we'll give us our NHL gimmicks before we get off the air here. More or less, I guess what they're asking is we talked about the high price lines. They know we love Edmonton. They know we love St. Louis. It's probably a step down when you go to Calgary and Tampa. We talked a little bit about Montreal being a line that we like that's cheap. I guess more or less our top three lines, our top three inexpensive line stacks. I guess that's the best way to phrase this question.
I mean, can we just say Montreal? I mean, there's value to be had throughout them. Yeah, that's where I'm looking for value. Montreal. Again, it starts at that top line. The third line is in play for me. And, if you need some more value, you can dip down to the second and even maybe the third line for St. Louis, although you better have a Connor McDavid and a bunch of studs in there if you're going down to Yashkin and pay RV.
All right, I'll put it this way then, Boggs. I also like the Flames second line. I think they could have a multi-point game, although I'm not in love with it. And, of course, both of those Kings lines to me as well have multi-goal upside. We talked a little about St. Louis' second line, Edmonton's St. Louis 2, Edmonton 2, and then more importantly, I think Calgary's second line, and LA's 2 line. Give me the line you like best out of that 5, which is probably between Calgary and LA, I assume.
It'd probably be Calgary, then LA, and then St. Louis.
There you go. Breaking down the top lines and the inexpensive lines along with everything else, guys. That's going to wrap up our game-by-game breakdown, our questions, unfortunately, as well, because we are at a time here as the NFL show will follow us. If we didn't get to your question and you're a premium member, head over to the chat shortly. I'll be talking with you from 3 p.m. Eastern to 4 p.m. Eastern, answering all things NHL. So go on over there, enjoy me. Let's have some fun. Now it is time for NHL gimmicks, and we're going to kick it off with my big money, no whammy play of the night. And we're going to St. Louis to the Scott Trade Center, where I'm looking at Vladimir Tarasenko, the Blues, and Tarasenko home to the Arizona Coyotes, a team we absolutely love to pick on, especially when on the road. This guy's hat trick upside tonight. I suggest you get him into your cash game lineup and have heavy exposure to him in GPPs. Now, time for my bold fade of the night, and I've been back and forth on this one. And, it's mostly a cash game thing for me, but I started with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then I thought, well, you know what? There's some upside there. And I went to Philadelphia Flyers. I thought that's a tough matchup for the Tays and Kane line. Then I went back to Tampa Bay. So basically what I'm saying is both of those lines I think can be faded in cash. Both of them still have potential in GPPs, but they also have the potential to be shut down tonight just because Tampa Bay on the road in the back-to-back facing a tough Kings team, and, of course, Philly likely to line up against Tays and Kane at least to start the game. Both of those lines you can be careful with, and if you're just entering 2 or 3 lineups, I think you can fade those, and it's not going to come back to burn you. We are more interested, certainly, in your St. Louis and your Edmontons tonight. All right, now it is time for our fearsome threesome, where Boggs and I both will be 3 players we think will have big games tonight in each price bracket. Boggs, the floor is yours.
Sure. Give me Connor McJesus up there at the top.
Yeah.
Braden Shen, and it's more, I guess, of a value play on DraftKings, but Brendan Gallagher.
Gallagher quite cheap, and on that third line that Boggs really likes. My top play, of course, Vladimir Tarasenko, the mid-tier, Patrick Maroon. Love the orders, obviously playing with McDavid at even strength and that top power play net. Huge for Maroon, maybe the best mid-tier price point player out there. And for value, we're going to Montreal. I'm with Boggs. I'm going with Arturi Lehkonen and Andrew Shaw. Both those guys are cheap, getting power play time on the top 2 lines. That is the place to be when looking for value tonight. Well, that's going to do it for us, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck in your games. I'm Pepsi 7. He's Boggs Light, and we gone.